Hello, everybody. Welcome to Today in Space. We are just popping in on the Jared Isaacman hearing. It's the Q&A. Jared was just asked about the whole situation with Donald Trump taking away his nomination and giving it back. So we're going to listen into there and let us know if you got any questions.
My nomination, he gifted me an extended summer vacation where I could take my kids on some adventures before they lose interest in me. And then I understand that he ran a competitive process and interviewed several candidates. I was grateful for consideration at the time and happy to be here now. In terms of donations, I think it was covered over the summer. I actually felt I had enough exposure to Washington and got over maybe some of the initial intimidation factors, so much so that I thought perhaps I would have a political career, maybe be able to contribute for all the right reasons. So it shouldn't be surprising that I supported the Republican Party. I mean, at the same time period, I probably made 30 times that amount in donations to charitable causes. With respect to Elon Musk, that question comes up. In fact, every story I see that writes about my nomination refers to the Musk ally or the Musk friend. It's funny that in a world where everybody has a phone with a camera on it, there are no pictures of us at dinner, at a bar, on an airplane, or on a yacht because they don't exist. My relationship with Mr. Musk is the fact that I led 2 missions to space at SpaceX because it's the only organization that can send astronauts to and from space since the shuttle was retired. And in that respect, my relationship is no different than that of NASA.
Mr. Haynes, congratulations on your nomination to such a critical role as well. If confirmed as the Assistant Secretary, you will oversee the Office of Industry and Analysis, which is housed under the International Trade Administration. As part of the office's responsibilities, INA produces trade data that is responsible for informing trade policies and decisions across the federal.
And folks, let me know if there's any issues with the audio, but thank you for joining me. We're just listening in on some questions here.
Making short-sighted and ill-informed decisions that could impact domestic industries and workforces, as well as alienate some of our closest international allies. As you may be aware, earlier this year, the president fired the commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is responsible for complying critical economic data like employment numbers, as well as the inflation rate. Not only was this firing clearly political in nature, because the president didn't like what the data said, it also calls into question the accuracy of data produced going forward from the BLS. So my fear is that this firing and other offices throughout the federal government, including INA, which you'll oversee, will face political pressures from the president to produce certain figures, certain metrics that align with his policy goals, rather than actually publishing what the country needs, which is unbiased data and statistics. So my question for you, do you believe that there is any political influence in the data currently being produced by the Office of Industry and Analysis? And how do you plan, if confirmed, in ensuring that INA continues to produce the unbiased data, which is absolutely essential to policy making?
Thank you for that question, Senator Peters. The short answer is no, there is no political bias in the data that we produce. And if confirmed, it will be one of my highest priorities to ensure that the data that we receive, both from industry partners, American companies, and from unbiased data sources, both private proprietary, will remain of the highest integrity.
Thank you. Senator Sheehy.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Haynes, we've heard a lot about the politicization of job numbers and economic statistics over the past year since President Trump's taken office, but isn't it accurate that Gina Raimondo had an 800,000 job revision when she was Secretary of Commerce under the Biden administration?
That's possible, Senator. I'm not sure the exact statistics, but
yeah, no, that's what happened. That's the fact. So we're routinely told that this administration and the Republican Party has politicized numbers. We've warped data and we've lied to the American people. The truth is, we saw manufacturing flee this country. 97% of rare earths and critical minerals are now processed in China. That data didn't seem to move the needle at all, despite us watching for decades as manufacturing critical industries fled this country under overburdensome regulation and incentivization that sent those industries to other countries. And every administration, whether they had politicized data, non-politicized, they chose to either ignore the data or lie about the data and sent those industries overseas. And now we are paying for that every single day, and Jared's job is going to be exponentially harder because so much of the critical materials he's going to need to send our astronauts back to the moon and to maintain space dominance doesn't come from America. And some of our most sensitive technology is built with components that are made in China. It's a very country that is working every single day to undermine our supremacy. So I'd like to hear your plan on making sure that not just that we have the data, but you are ensuring that data is shared in a timely manner so that we can make sure we're making policy decisions in this body, as well as in the executive branch, to ensure that we're bringing those industries back and ensuring we have dominance for the next century.
Thank you for that question, Senator Sheehy. First, you do have my commitment that we'll be able to share that data with this committee and work collaboratively to solve these critical issues. In the executive branch, I can give one specific example. INA plays a critical role in the investment committee that is currently tasked with solving our critical mineral supply chain issues. We are mapping mine to markets for all 54 critical minerals. We've identified over 700 projects and have already deployed or committed letters of intent and term sheets for about $16 billion worth of projects covering about half of the 54 critical minerals. That's just one aspect of the work that INA is doing in terms of providing that data and making sure that principals and decision makers in the White House, obviously Secretary Lutnick, have the information they need to make decisions to solve these problems. And we'll continue to do that if confirmed.
What is there a statute that structurally ties you to the Department of War so that the economic data that you're gathering and synthesizing is actually communicated in a timely manner to the people that need to know and DOW?
I'm not aware of a specific statute. We do have good connectivity with the Pentagon, the Office of Strategic Capital, and other areas within.
Also, the Department of War is a crazy name for a department. I'm just saying.
Personnel and just good relationships with the folks over there. But it could be strengthened, and if there are ideas from this committee of how to strengthen that, I'll be willing to share them and would be willing to work with you to do that.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that because obviously what we've seen, again, especially in the last 35 years, is we've seen a pretty sclerotic bureaucracy overtake our defense acquisition system, which has placed process over outcomes. There needs to be a forcing function that ensures that DOW is not making procurement decisions and national economic strategy decisions related to our defense industrial base that are de-linked from the economic reality of what happens here. And unfortunately, there's not a real feedback loop there, and the results have been apparent. You know, China builds ships 230 times faster than we do. You know, they have the ability to put more planes in the air at times than we have missiles to shoot them down. They have more material on the battlefield, the ability to project that power. And when we talk about the space economy, you know, every American interacts every single day with space, you know, 1,000 times, you know, a day. They don't even realize it. You know, GPS, without thinking about it, we press go on the Apple Maps and don't realize that if we don't have an orbital infrastructure that provides that GPS data, life shuts down. I mean, Uber doesn't show up at the street corner with you anymore. Your DoorDash doesn't arrive. Our entire life evolves around an orbital economy that will be critical in Jared's new role, but probably even more critical given your role to ensure we understand that those rare earths, the quantum computing that Senator Schmidt talked about, that all is going to derive from the data you provide, DOW, to make sure that our economic supremacy goes hand in hand with our military supremacy. So I would encourage you to try to make that link a little more structural and strengthen that because it's going to be absolutely critical in the next 10 years. Thank you.
What do you think, Senator?
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again, Mr. Isaacman. You may recounter that during your last nomination hearing, you refused to confirm whether Elon Musk, with whom you have deep personal and financial ties, was present at the meeting that then President-elect Trump offered you the job of NASA administrator. So I wanted to give you one more chance to set the record straight. Was Elon Musk
He's
in
already
the
answered
meeting
this question.
at Mar-a-Lago when President Trump offered you the job?
Senator, it's great to have a conversation again. I thought we really ran this one to ground last time, but
Yeah.
what I will tell you, Senator, and I wish I had the opportunity to explain it further before, is my first interview with the president. I think I've had several opportunities since to re-engage. Was in a ballroom type setting, Senator. There were dozens of people moving in and out that I would not say were in the meeting.
It's a very simple question. Was President Trump in the room when, was Elon Musk in the room when President Trump offered you the job?
Senator, my interview, my conversations with the president, and there were dozens of people moving in and out of the room, and I don't think it's fair to bring any of them into this matter.
So once again, you're refusing to tell us whether Elon Musk was in the room that day. And that actually makes me think that Elon Musk was in the room that day, but that you understand that it's a clear conflict of interest that he was there. You're asking us to confirm you.
That's crazy, Marky. Come on, man.
It's $15 billion from American taxpayers for its business with NASA. You also have multiple financial relationships with Elon Musk, including investments in SpaceX, a contract between his company Starlink and your payments company, and even more, you bought space flights
It's
from
fascinating,
SpaceX.
Heather.
Mr. Isaacman, what was the value of these contracts for space flights with SpaceX?
Well, I mean, Senator, just to clarify on these points, I have no direct or indirect equity exposure to any aerospace company, including SpaceX. I have disclosed all of my financial ties to the ethics officials at NASA, as well as the Office of Government Ethics. They've generated an ethics letter. I fully intend to adhere to it. I more than acknowledge that I went to space twice with SpaceX, but I point out they're the only company capable of sending astronauts to and from space since the shuttle was retired. My relationship with them is no different than NASA's. In fact, if there was more than one company, I suspect I would have paid less.
So what was the value of the contracts for space flights with SpaceX?
I mean, Senator, I don't think it's lost on anyone that going to and from space is rather expensive. We never disclosed the.
Well, your financial paperwork suggests it was over $50 million. So was it 100 million? Was it 200 million?
Senator, I mean, we've never disclosed it other than the fact that we were able to raise substantially more than the cost of the mission for charitable causes like St. Jude.
So you won't tell us how much you paid the man who publicly campaigned for your nomination. Will you request that SpaceX release you?
They didn't give me a discount, Senator.
I appreciate that, but you were paying him. Will you request that SpaceX release you from the NDA so that you can provide the committee with this information?
Senator, I will commit to always work with the appropriate ethics professionals to make sure I'm, continuously in compliance with my ethics agreement.
Will you ask him to release you from the NDA so that you can provide that information?
I have no issue asking them to release me from non-disclosure, Senator.
Okay, that would be helpful. Mr. Isaacman, can you tell us, since President Trump initially withdrew your nomination, have you had any communication with Mr. Musk about the job of NASA administrator?
I have not, Senator.
You have not.
This is why I don't watch these things, because I'm getting triggered here. These questions are just showing how much, unfortunately, my senator here, how little they actually know about space and everything that America has been doing over the last multiple decades. And I get that for a political reason, he needs to try and get his questions in to move it to a certain way, given other political things that they're doing. But I'm sorry, these questions are showing that he actually doesn't know what he's talking about, unfortunately.
Senator, I certainly support the president's goal of reducing the deficit and shrinking our national debt. Now, an awful lot has happened from the initial presidential budget request to the continuing resolution that we've been operating in, to the one big beautiful bill that has plussed up additional funding for NASA. So I would, if I'm confirmed, I'd love to get my arms around where we are presently at.
Well, a 50% cut to the NASA science budget is dramatic, in considering reports about your, quote, Project Athena plan for NASA, which literally banks on the decimation of our scientific abilities. Among other things, this document calls for NASA to stop collecting its own data and instead set up a taxpayer-funded subscription service from private companies for their products, companies that will set their own price for data that NASA needs to function on an ongoing basis. Would Starlink or SpaceX be companies that NASA would potentially have to turn to obtain data?
Well, Senator, first of all, I think pretty much everything you just said there was not correct. What that draft document contemplated was working with commercial companies for certain types of Earth observation data, not SpaceX or Starlink. I think I specifically called out Planet and Black Sky as examples of companies that might be able to deliver Earth observation and climate science data at lower cost, specifically to free up resources for other planetary science missions that commercial companies are not capable of doing.
Well, I would say this, the proposal, and this is the truth, the proposal would strip NASA for parts and instead transfer taxpayer funds directly to the bank accounts of Starlink and SpaceX, companies owned by the very same man who may or may not have been in the room when Trump offered you the job. And we're just going to have to keep a very close eye on what will unfold at NASA if you are confirmed. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Budd.
Gotta do
Thank you,
better,
Mr.
man.
Chairman.
These questions a week.
Thank you all for being here. Mr. Isaacman, great to see you again. Let's talk about NASA's QUEST program of quiet supersonic. You know, it's designed to de-risk the science, validate the quiet supersonic technologies, and then let American industries like Boom, for instance, which has a presence in North Carolina, let them take the lead in building the commercial market. So as administrator, how will you ensure that NASA stays focused on enabling that new industry and avoids creating unintentional regulatory or technical barriers for the next generation supersonic flight?
Well, Senator, this is certainly a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. I do think it's NASA's job. I believe it's funded by taxpayers to explore the near impossible in air and space. And when they arrive at a major development and that capability is mature enough to hand it off to industry where competition can drive innovation and bring down costs. X-59 is an interesting example. There is some overlap with what Boom's doing. I think actually Boom is an extraordinary company. I'd love to see a lot more American companies trying to break the status quo and take on big, bold projects like that. I think NASA just needs a lot more X-planes, honestly. That was a really exciting one that we all had an opportunity to watch rather recently alongside the recent performance from Boom. But I'd love to see us have multiple programs that are exploring radical designs in airframe and propulsion. And when they do have those breakthroughs, not dissimilar to the 1970s, 1980s, when NASA was experimenting with fly-by-wire and thrust vectoring capabilities that have made their way in commercial aircraft as well as military aircraft like the F-22.
Do you think there's a problem with Quest eventually competing against Boom? Do you think that's a potential problem?
No, I would certainly hope.
I'd say the whole industry, not just Boom in particular.
I'd certainly hope not, Senator. I actually don't think NASA's at its best when it's doing what industry is doing, because at that point, talent would naturally probably gravitate to industry where they get the advantage of, who knows, appreciating stock options and such. I think NASA should constantly be recalibrating to work on that near impossible, what no one else is doing, which is going to attract that kind of exciting technology. That's going to attract that kind of talent to work on that exciting technology. When they figure it out, they hand it off to industry and they recalibrate to the next big, bold endeavor. I think that serves the talent, workforce, and the mission of NASA very well.
Thank you. You know, in your testimony earlier, you were clear that the United States is in the middle of a second space race. The great rival that you mentioned spent more than a decade establishing a space Silk Road, offering collaboration on satellite, space launch, space infrastructure development to more countries across the Middle East and North Africa. So how does this sort of space diplomacy from an adversary affect our prospects for continuing dominance in space? And what's your vision for space diplomacy of ours?
Well, Senator, I think there's a couple parts to that. So first, NASA has always been referred to, as a soft power. There's lots of diplomatic implications to their mission. A lot of our greatest endeavors are worked on with our allies across Europe, the Middle East, Canada, for example. I think what's concerning now is that some of these countries have more than one choice. So for the longest time period, America owned the ultimate high ground of space, and that attracted the interest of many nations to want to collaborate and partner with us. The Chinese do have their own space station now. They went from a single technaut in orbit approximately 20 years ago to having a space station where they're launching at an extraordinary cadence. So I think this is why there needs to be urgency to take a close look at NASA, what's going right, and do a lot more of that, and the things that are going wrong to clear those obstacles and paths so we can get back to doing, world-changing missions again.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks again for your time. Chairman?
Yeah. Great answer.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much for that and for calling this hearing. Mr. Isaacson, welcome back to the Commerce Committee. I guess I'll just start out by simply asking, Mr. Isaacman, you believe in science?
Of course, Senator.
You support science?
I do, Senator.
Oh, boy.
You've conducted a lot of science experiments throughout not just your youth, but through your career, correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. Now, a few of my colleagues have raised the concern about the nearly 50% cut to NASA's Science Mission Directorate, a directorate that is explicitly foundational to NASA's 1958 congressional charter. I think by the very nature of the number of questions that you're receiving today from colleagues about NASA, it shows the broad support for the science mission at NASA as well. Congress has already made clear that we rejected these cuts and will continue to fund the scientific missions that uphold NASA's statutory purpose. My question, yes or no, is do you agree that NASA has a statutory obligation under its founding charter to conduct and support Earth and space science for the benefit of the nation?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is going great, Mr. Isaacson. Many of
Isaacman!
NASA's science programs are not commodities. You cannot run a value-added calculation on dual-use information that supports both science discovery and national security. Now, for example, these missions provide indispensable space weather data. We were chatting about that before. I appreciate my colleague reminding us all across America when we pull out our devices or we're depending on the simple services that we interact with every day that we're touching some of this and we depend on it. Like your friend, Mr. Musk, I would say some of the commercial actors, they depend on after solar activity has repeatedly disrupted their constellations as well. Now, NASA, Earth science assets also ensure GPS integrity, track environmental changes, everything you just described. U.S. military readiness, critically important, national security, the importance of this science directorate. So let me ask you directly, yes or no, will you execute the funds appropriated by Congress for NASA's critical science missions exactly as Congress has directed?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We will maximize the scientific value of every dollar that Congress affords the agency.
I appreciate that very much. My last question is, while I didn't support the reconciliation bill that passed over the summer, there are pieces of it, particularly in NASA's section, that hold promise, and I appreciate the inclusion of them. For example, the NASA section funds a Mars telecommunications orbiter, specifically one that was proposed independently when NASA solicited its commercial industry for Mars sample return mission architecture from space. I see you nodding. You're very familiar with this, I imagine.
Reasonably familiar, Senator.
The orbiter would not only support future exploration missions, but most importantly, it would help support the critical comms relay needed for existing and future science missions like the Mars sample return. Now, New Mexico is home to companies like Rocket Lab, who produce the world's highest efficiency space-grade solar and powered critical NASA missions and would power the MTO, for example. So yes or no, do you commit to following through on the letter of the law and ensuring a rapid acquisition strategy for the MTO to be able to deliver it by the law's 2028 due date?
Senator, my commitment to you and all the other members is always to follow the law. As a space enthusiast, I am super excited about any activities that open up further science and discovery on Mars.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wow, that was a crazy questioning.
Thank you. Senator
Well
Klobuchar.
done by Jared. Woof.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to start out with a kind of interesting question about agriculture data. Mr. Isaacman, I don't think many people understand that NASA's satellite data is hugely valuable for farmers. Programs like NASA Acres and NASA Harvest use satellite imaging to forecast production and monitor crop yields. I'm the ranking member on the Ag Committee, and I've introduced legislation called the Agriculture Innovation Act to strengthen that data collection. Could you talk about your plans to preserve and expand those types of monitoring programs, weather patterns and the like, and how you can better work with the Department of Agriculture?
Sure, Senator. I appreciate the question. As I mentioned with Senator Moran before, at the present time, we at least inhabit only a single planet, and it's probably important for us to continue to study it to the greatest extent possible. NASA's had a long-running program with Intelsat. I fully support that we should be gathering data that especially contribute to hardships here on Earth. I mean, obviously, there's great agriculture opportunities, but these can be impacted by droughts and wildfires and flooding. And grateful that NASA has the capability to gather some of this data in real time. I don't see that going away ever.
Thank you. Other end of our state, Mayo Clinic, which I'm sure you're aware of. They've been involved in space medicine since 1960. When research related to the force of gravity during acceleration influenced the position of seats for the Mercury spaceflight program. And most recently, they've identified some important research project in the field of aging, regenerative medicine that can be conducted in space. How will you continue to support NASA and institutions like Mayo's efforts to advance science that helps here on Earth?
Senator, I couldn't agree with this area of study more. We are actually quickly reaching a point where it's no longer a technological limitation for deep space type missions, but human physiology and psychology. So in that respect, I obviously fully support all the studies that can be done so that when the day comes that we actually send NASA astronauts to Mars, that they can come home healthy enough to tell us about it. This is probably the single greatest accomplishment we've had on the International Space Station over the last quarter of a century, is keeping humans alive in an environment that is quite challenging.
Mm-hmm. And then just on the research side, a lot of academic institutions like the University of Minnesota rely on publicly funded data from NASA's missions. And as NASA continues to partner with private firms, the commercial data is not as easily accessible to researchers. And I think it's a balance. Obviously, the partnering with private has brought with it some success, but then you want to have the public institutions be able to access that data for the public portion of this, which has helped us. I'm not going to go through all the inventions and things that have come out of this type of space mission. So what steps will you take to ensure that data from NASA missions continues to remain available for researchers across the country?
Senator, I fully support it, and I think this actually goes to some of the questions from Senator Markey before. I absolutely think that NASA should be making available all of its data, especially its Earth observation data, freely to academia, so they can draw their own conclusions from it. I don't think it's the most helpful every 4 or 8 years when administrations change that certain scientific positions become overly political. I think that we should be making that data available to academic institutions and let their scientists and research draw their own conclusions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Haynes, congratulations on your...
Well said. So, I mean, I just want to tuck on that a little bit because that was interesting. I felt a lot of different things during that questioning. So I think that last question was really good about the aspect of data that NASA is getting, right? If NASA is in this public-private partnership where private companies are building space infrastructure, and it's not just NASA and all of their satellites, that's a good question. Where does that data come from? Is it being shared? Are those companies not, are they charging too much for NASA for those things when arguably you could probably say that those private companies were probably paid by NASA and the taxpayers to even get that thing up there. So I think that's a great question. But I also can't get over the fact, and this is just the nature of NASA and it being a government agency, the senators that are trying to make sure that their constituents, that their state is getting the airtime of, we need that money that NASA's getting. And it's something I don't pay attention much to. It's usually something I will follow another person like Eric Berger, or there's a ton of people who cover this all the time. Um, I will say that it's tough to listen to, especially when I'm so focused on the science and the engineering part of it. This is the balance of NASA and funding, and it's very different than what it was during the major space race, right? Where we went to the moon. There was this, obviously, there were contractors that were bidding, there were states that were benefiting more than other states based on that. But that had a much different budget. That was a military dominance move of early NASA, right? Uh, that was defense budget level spending. And when NASA's not getting anywhere near that kind of funding anymore, um, it's interesting to see the political side of it. And 60 years in the future from when NASA started, it's a different place. It's a different place.
The global economy is increasingly driven by cross-border data flows, digital services, and online platforms. And U.S. firms are facing more foreign barriers, such as data localization rules and discriminatory digital taxes. Within ITA, industry and analysis is already involved in tracking these digital barriers and advising on market access for U.S. providers. If confirmed, Mr. Haynes, how do you see INA's role in digital trade evolving? And what would be your top priorities for ITA's work on open digital markets and cross-border data flows?
Thank you for that question, Senator Young, and appreciate also speaking to your staff yesterday. It was
Yes, sir.
good to hear your priorities. I would say two things. Within the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Services, which is under the Assistant Secretary for Industry Analysis, we run two specific programs that focus on data privacy. One is the Cross-Border Privacy Rules, or CBPR, is a voluntary certification where U.S. companies can opt into essentially adhering to robust data protections. We then request that various countries recognize those rules and adhere to those standards. As we've been going through the agreements on reciprocal tariffs or any of the bilateral trade agreements, we've been making sure that CBPR is front and center in terms of the standard that we want to hold our bilateral trading partners to in the digital space. The second program and its sister programs would be the US-EU Data Privacy Framework. We've also started a program with the UK and the Swiss. I think it provides a very firm foundation in terms of allowing free flow of personal data from Europe to the United States. I think those are two good foundations that we could expand upon, especially as we're getting into the US-EU trade agreements, as the Secretary let.
Man, what a mess all this trade stuff has created. I mean, I understand that you've got to have trade agreements set up and all that, but boy, things that we just did not necessarily need to complicate, that have not been fully solved, that are still making things complicated. So, folks, we're here. I don't know how much longer I'll be staying on. If Jared gets another question, I think Mr. Haynes is going to be asked another question here. But if you have any questions, let me know. If you're hanging out, let me know. What do you think about Jared? I know a lot of us in the space industry are very excited to see Jared, but also just a competent leader. We've seen him lead space missions, right, to orbit, the Polaris Dawn mission, the Inspiration 4 mission. He's gone to space multiple times. He's performed a space walk, or gone out of the spacecraft. He didn't actually spacewalk like the early days, fully outside, but he was exposed to space and going up the ladder and exposing the top half of his body to space. He's done incredible things. Everything he's done leading up to this, in my opinion, has shown his leadership capability, right? You've got both Inspiration 4 and the Polaris Dawn mission raised millions of dollars for St. Jude's cancer research. That alone shows you that in a world where consumerism and profit at all costs is just everywhere these days, to have somebody who could be our NASA administrator. Oop, that canceled. What happened? Anyways, going back to it, let me reset here. Okay. So, having a NASA administrator that is focused not only on running a business, right? He's an entrepreneur, right? He's made tons of money with Shift 4, right? And he's done everything we've seen so far from being a public official. He's set them aside and made sure that he is separate from them. He has paid SpaceX to go to space for his missions, but as a paying customer, right? It's not like he's getting a freebie and flying into space from SpaceX. It's a business relationship. And then to go out of his way before he was ever considering to be the NASA administrator, to pay for a mission, to go to space, and then fundraise for something I think everyone can agree with, which is cancer research for kids, right? Where do you find someone who's a politician, right? This is a political position. Where do you find a politician that does all that stuff? And then is an actual astronaut, has a deep technical knowledge, and also fixes and flies jets on the side. I mean, this guy is a test pilot. It's no joke. Jared Isaacman is the real deal, and I don't know what happened to the feed here from the government, from the Senate hearing, but it sounded pretty good. We were on for about 36 minutes. I think we caught some great questions and answers from the politicians, and I think Jared held his own. And it is amazing. We talked about this in the comments, but it is amazing what having a second try at the same hearing will do for your political chops, as Jared Isaacman had, where he was originally nominated by President Trump. Then President Trump took away the nomination and now gave it back to him after a year of NASA not having any leadership. I mean, talk about being given a blessing in disguise to be able to just simply go in there a second time to the Senate hearing. And I love his confidence. I love his humility. I'm loving everything I'm hearing. Jared gets my vote. If I was able to vote, I would vote for Jared Isaacman on this. I would love to hear what you guys think too. But unless you guys have any other questions, I'm going to get out of here, grab some lunch. We've got some really, really fascinating interviews coming up. I've made some great connections over the years. We've got space health. We're going to be talking about Jared's first nomination, right? We'll have an episode out soon about that. We're also going to have other people on who have been involved in what the space industry is all about international partnerships. What does that mean? How do you do good international partnerships to have space around the world, as NASA would be, as it is today, right? A major part of the International Space Station. Understanding how those relationships are done today gives us a better idea of the challenges that someone like Jared Isaacman is going to have as not really a politician, an entrepreneur, an engineer, a test pilot, joining the ranks of NASA as the leader. There's going to be political things that he's going to have to deal with and measure against that just being the head engineer, the lead engineer, or the test pilot, right? Just the astronaut. That you don't really get a lot of the politics that someone who's the NASA administrator is going to get. So I'm certainly interested to see where that goes. Heather, I'll see you later. Thank you for joining so much. I appreciate all of you. Lots of new episodes coming up on Today in Space. Make sure to subscribe. And then in the link on everywhere that we have online, there's stand.store/AG3D Labs. Has the links to everything. The podcasts are down at the bottom, both Today in Space and our new 3D printing podcast, Layered Insights, with my co-host Matt Guy of Niche 3D. We talk about 3D printing, so if you're interested in that, go to the link in our bio wherever you're watching, stand.store/AG3D Labs. You can subscribe, check out everything that we've got going on. At AG3D Printing, our 3D printing store is open, and we are 3D printing like crazy. These are our collectible pin and jewelry stands. Those are available in our Etsy store. And I also have just 3D printed another Blue Origin rocket pen. We also have the Starship rocket pen. Those are all available at ag3dprinting.etsy.com. I literally 3D print and make them for you. So if you're interested in a really cool gift for the holidays, make sure to go check that out. And we'll be running deals. And listen, if you're listening to the stream, hit me up, DM me. I'll make sure you get a nice, sweet deal. I love making sure that y'all have very unique and interesting gifts for the holidays. And that's just a small part of what we're doing at AG3D. And I'm excited to share more of that with you. But I've gone on too long. That's it, folks. Spread love, spread science, be well, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next episode.